The story of Emerald Mesa is as mundane as a story in the City of Los Angeles universe can get. Colonel Lapis, or as he known at the time, just Lapis, needs to escape Emerald Mesa, find Commander Marigold, destroy Metal Gear Helios, and then escape Fort Yellow. He survives the explosion and wakes up 1 week later in Azure Heaven, and he's promoted to Colonel. The end? At least until Broken Chariot rolls around, but that's for later. Simple, right? Good guy with gun, blows up base of bad guy with nuke, saves the lives of a few thousand people, and saves the day. Now, not to say that 1,000 or even 10,000 lives being at stake isn't anything, but what if I told you the real stakes of Emerald Mesa was a lot more than that? What if I told you the stakes of Emerald Mesa transcended Earth, our universe, universes beyond, and maybe even life and death itself? What if everything in the Cola universe, from the moment Lapis falls down into the sewers in part 2, isn't real? Only a facade. You know the story of Emerald Mesa by now, and it's rather long to repeat, so I'll give a real quick recap. Crypt Scouts have become aware of a mysterious set of schematics in Emerald Mesa. Kalis dispatches Lapis on a mission to retrieve it. Lapis gets underground but meets Colonel Daffodil of the Glows, who rigged the underground section to blow with C4. The place blows up and Lapis falls down a hole created by the explosions and gets knocked out. He wakes up to find he's stranded in the sewers. He finds a way out and tails Colonel Daffodil all the way to Fort Yellow, where he learns of a secret project named Helios. Eventually, he finds Helios is a Metal Gear, destroys it, and escapes from the exploding Fort Yellow, killing Colonel Daffodil. He's just barely caught in the explosion, waking up in Azure Heaven. Kalos promotes him to Colonel, and that's the end. So, you're thinking, what the fuck? What's all this about? What's at stake in the Emerald Masons and transcending our universes and maybe even other universes? Well, the secret to unlocking the truth of Emerald Mesa is something so perplexing. It appears a few times, but is never mentioned in dialogue. Something so unexplainable and out of place in the Cola universe that it's regarded as a non-canon Easter egg, a true anomaly. And you've probably already guessed, I'm talking about Morpheus. The rabbit hole starts with one simple question. Do you think it's a coincidence that Morpheus first appears in the underground of Part 3? Again, I know what you're thinking, you should probably be worried by now. What exactly is so important about that underground wreckage? Well, I can answer that question with a question. Have you noticed how Lapis is right on top of an explosion that should be objectively fatal even for the Cola universe's bullshittery, falls down into the rocky underground section which is lifeless and dead, and then starts to see a ghost? Yes, that's right. I'm saying Lapis died at exactly this point. The fall to the underground is a pretty obvious reference to the fall to hell. When he falls, Kalis on the radio shouts and asks him what happened. This is very obviously a Metal Gear Solid reference. When the protagonist Solid Snake dies, other characters yell on the codec for his status. However, they only do that when he dies. Not knocked out, not in a gunfight, not even when he's captured, but only when he dies. So now that we've established that Lapis dies, except there's an Emerald Mesa Part 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, so it's pretty obvious he didn't die in Part 2, right? Well, that's because Lapis wakes up in a world that isn't his and is. You see, Lapis wakes up in some sort of afterlife that's designed to be a one-to-one replica of his mortal living life. That's why it picks up exactly where it left off. This dream world afterlife needs to be so perfect that Lapis can't even begin to know the truth. Every location is a facade, and everyone is a fake. Kalis, Marigold, Brigand, Shadow, Raven, Venom, Antidote, everyone. From this point forward, is just a soulless replica. Again, let me remind you, Do you think it's just a coincidence that Lapis starts seeing Morpheus, a being which transcends the boundaries and all understandings of life and death, immediately after this fall? Now, about Morpheus. As I said earlier, he is the key to unlocking this rabbit hole. As the game progresses, it's very obvious that Morpheus has taken some kind of interest in Lapis. He can be seen watching Lapis a few times. His presence can be described as similar to the G-Man, or, for people who remember Playground Rumors, Herobrine. Morpheus doesn't speak to anyone, except just to say some cryptic ghost sentences that really mean nothing, but this does prove that he is capable of speech, in the English language. It's unknown how old Morpheus is, however the earliest trace of his existence is on a cave painting, and he looks pretty much the same as he does now. So Morpheus is at the very youngest prehistoric. He's probably old as time itself, or maybe even older. Morpheus is the god of dreams, so that not only adds more proof to this theory, but it also explains why Morpheus is here. In fact, he's probably the one who built this afterlife dream realm specifically for Lapis. That's why he's watching him. Also, while everyone else might be a fake, Morpheus is actually the real Morpheus. He can travel between Lapis's dream world and the real world whenever he wants. I also think this might be the case for every person who's ever lived and died in the Cola universe. Or maybe it's just Lapis. If you'll remember at the start, I did say that whatever happens to Lapis will have consequences on the universes beyond even ours. I know you're thinking, why does that matter if we have already established that Lapis is already dead? Just keep watching and just keep listening. Now, why a god who exists beyond life and death and is older than time itself would have interest in some random guy? Well, obviously, Lapis is important enough for a few 10,000 lives. He is the sole reason City of Lost Angels universe avoids the extinction event timeline. But that's not important enough for him to pique the interest of an ageless ghost god, right? Well, let's keep going. In part 4, Lapis arrives out of the sewers, which remember is a metaphor for hell. So he must be in purgatory now. He finds Fort Yellow, learns of Helios, and destroys it, which activates Fort Yellow's detonation sequence, and he's able to escape, just barely. So, we've established that Morpheus controls this dream world, and except for Lapis, everything in it. Well, I think the whole nuclear self-detonation thing is actually just a lie. So Lapis doesn't question the blinding white flash, which is a rapture. How do I know this? Because Lapis wakes up in a very bright place that literally has heaven in its name. While he was asleep, he was being looked after by people in white robes. Obviously, the doctor's coats are a modern equivalent of an angel's robes. Lapis goes to Kalos, who is an angel in disguise, who promotes him to colonel, which is actually saying that Lapis is free to go to heaven. When Lapis dies, he gets sent to hell because he's killed people, but he's given the chance to redeem himself by destroying Helios. Obviously, all the gunfire and the self-destruct puts Lapis in harm's way, but he chooses to put himself in this very dangerous situation to save the people he does actually care about by stopping a nuclear launch. When he accomplishes this task and saves lives, he goes to heaven, because the selfless act of destroying Helios proves that he has done some bad things, but at his core he is a good person, choosing to put the safety of thousands of people above his own. Except, everything I've said since the thing about the nuke actually being a rapture isn't true, because we've already established that nothing after part 2 is real. I mention it because the subtle Christian afterlife imagery is more subtle proof that Lapis is in fact dead, just in case you still don't believe me. Now, what I said about the start, the stakes transcending our own universe, you're probably getting bored of me continuing to say that we're getting to it, but trust me, when we get to Broken Chariot, we are getting to it. Broken Chariot is when the fact that Lapis is dead becomes too obvious to ignore. So you remember how everyone except Lapis is a fake, soulless, non-sentient replica designed to make sure Lapis doesn't find out what really happened? Well, I did say the one exception to that rule was Morpheus. He was real and could go between Lapis' Azure heaven and reality anytime he wanted. Well, what I waited until now is there's someone else who has both of those traits. Someone who knows the truth of Lapis' reality and can step into and out of it whenever he wants. You've probably guessed, the only new character introduced in Broken Chariot is Belphegor. What's so important about this one sniper? How does this guy possess the power to transcend the borders between life and death? Well, the secret is in the name, Belphegor. Belphegor is actually the name of a demon from hell. The takeaway from this is that Belphegor from Kola is actually just named after Belphegor the demon. But what if it's not a stolen name? What if there's no identity crisis? Because the sniper and the demon are actually the same person. Belphegor could step into Lapis' afterlife and attempts to kill him. Now, Lapis can't die. Well, he can, but Morpheus will try to make sure Lapis doesn't die until Morpheus can get what he wants from him. Since Morpheus is in control of everything inside this afterlife that is native to it, Lapis will never find himself killed at the hands of a fake replica. If Lapis does happen to die, his soul gets deleted and the realm is gone. But he can still die, and that's where Belphegor comes in. Because Belphegor is an outsider who walks into this realm, he isn't bound by these rules, and thus the only real threat to Lapis. Belphegor needs Lapis dead. Why? Because he's trying to stop another demon purge like the one that happens thousands of years ago. Could Lapis really pull something like that off? Not in the real world. But then why is Lapis' death so vital to stopping the purge? We'll get to that. Actually, I can't think of anything else to say, so I guess we could get to that right now. So, the demonic purge. Thousands of years ago, after Greece's destruction, a lone wanderer walked through the circles of hell with the goal of getting to the bottom and killing Satan. Millions of demons were killed, including some of the bigger and badder ones like Asmodeus, Beelzebub, Leviathan, etc. All except two: Satan and Belphegor. Satan actually survived the purge, but was rendered comatose by sheer physical trauma. Belphegor survived by doing the very same thing that got him cast to hell in the first place: not participating in the war. Belphegor avoided the lone figure. Who is this lone figure? Well, the entire plot of Emerald Mesa and Broken Chariot revolves around him. And you're thinking it's an it. It is a him. Now, if Lapis dies in part 2, then the Crypts never find out about Fort Yellow. Fort Yellow does exist in the real world, not just in Lapis' dream world. This is a fact, because Daffodil has to go somewhere, and the remnants of the glows have to have a base. So Fort Yellow does exist. But what about what's in it? That could be anything. What's in the Fort Yellow that we saw is only what Morpheus wanted, or rather allowed, Lapis to see. What is actually in there that Morpheus doesn't want Lapis to find out? Well, it's right in front of your face. In spirit. After the first demonic purge, the lone wanderer responsible ended up returning to Egypt, only to find it met the same fate as Greece. He knew who was responsible, and it was the same man, Mars. Barely 2 days later, Asgard met the same fate. With Odin's death, Mars had ended up waking something that never should have existed. However, he was able to unmake it and send it back to the unexistence it should have stayed in. This was what let Svartalfheim know it was time to attack Midgard. Rome was lost in the attack, except for Mars. Mars would lead armies of all the realms into an attack on Svartalfheim, ending the beast that had loomed over all other forms of life for centuries. But one who participated in this attack was the very same Phantom of Greece who was solely responsible for the demonic purge. In the blast of energy and heat that marked the end of Svartalfheim's reign of terror, he would be killed. Except he didn't die. He became comatose, but he did survive. Mars's body has never been found, but the lone figure's was. Thousands of years later, in a world with no Greece, Egypt, Rome, Asgard, or even Svartalfheim, Satan, who remember, he is still alive. Satan's grip on this world and its population have become stronger. The comatose body, throughout generations, came into the hands of the world government, who had it hidden away on the place nobody was and nobody was allowed to be. South Central Isles. However, the government was run out of South Central Isles, and they weren't able to hold on to it. It would soon be found by a man who is very important, and you know him by now. This man would try to use the technologies of his army to resurrect this comatose body. For this world needed a second demonic purge, and there's no one else who could do that in the world who's still alive, other than the Purifier who did the first one. No, it's not Doomguy. That'd be a pretty interesting shared timeline thing. Anyway, no, it's not Doomguy. This man has suffered a great defeat in his army. Having the Purifier on his side would instantly make him the sole ruler of the world. The man who speaks of the one known as the Purifier with such respect and honor. The man who respects the Purifier enough to name a weapon of mass destruction after him. Commander Marigold is in possession of the comatose body of Helios. Fort Yellow contains the body of a god. Commander Marigold is trying to resurrect a dead god. And how does Lapis, Morpheus, and Belphegor play into this? Let's start with the easiest to explain, Belphegor. Belphegor needs to make sure that Helios doesn't come to, and dies for good. Unfortunately, Belphegor isn't high enough rank or the occupation, doctor or engineer, to be allowed into Helios' chamber. Marigold does trust him, but in his human disguise he's only a sniper. So it's not as simple as just walking in and unplugging a life support when no one is looking. Belphegor is a sniper because he needs to kill Lapis by surprise. If he makes his presence known before the attack, Morpheus will catch on and will save Lapis, possibly by summoning a few privates and maybe even tougher characters. But why does Belphegor want Lapis dead? Lapis is the best chance of Helios being killed for good. Because he knows that Morpheus is using Lapis to see all the possible errors in Marigold's security, to make sure Fort Yellow is never penetrated or attacked. While Lapis is the only thing in this dream world that is real, and therefore Morpheus can't control him, he can't just turn back time out of fear that Lapis will realize what's going on. If Lapis does realize that, he could go postal and try to kill everyone, or even himself. Either way, Lapis realizes his reality, or lack thereof, and he won't do what Morpheus wants. Morpheus could also be using Lapis to find where Helios is. Morpheus wants Helios to wake up and commence the second demonic purge. Why? Perhaps he has mysterious benefactors, much like how the G-Man mentions his employers. Perhaps somehow Alfheim convinced him to do it. The Light Elves still do exist, but after the fall of Svartalfheim, they have decided to become much more reclusive for their own safety. And Lapis himself. Lapis is entirely oblivious to the fact that he is dead, and he's being used by Morpheus to locate Helios and make sure Marigold doesn't do any mistakes that result in Belphegor killing Helios. Belphegor wants to kill Helios to stop a second demonic purge. Because Jesus doesn't exist in this timeline and is stood in for by Odin, and Odin's dead, then Helios really is the only one who can stop the demons of hell. Again, Doomguy doesn't exist in this universe because they're two separate fictional universes. If Helios is taken off life support before he can wake up, then there is nothing that can stop Satan from ruling the world. Even if every human banded together and used every gun, stick, knife, fighter jet, grenade, and nuke they had, they still wouldn't stand a chance. Only Helios. But wait, Everything we see in City of Lost Angels from Emerald Mesa Part 2 onwards is part of this fake dream world. What's going on in Cola's realm of the living? Well, you'd think because the Crypts don't discover Fort Yellow and therefore can't destroy it, that we would be following the Extinction Events timeline. Except Metal Gear Helios doesn't exist. It's just a stand-in or an illusion for the real Helios in Laps's dream world. Both Extinction Event and what is believed to be Timeline Zero are both non-canonical. We'll never actually see the real Timeline Zero beyond Emerald Mesa Part 2. We can assume that the Crypts try to find Fort Yellow with no success. However, we can't see what happens to Helios. Does Belphegor succeed and disconnect Helios' life support? Or does Marigold's science team finally finish resurrecting him? We won't know until we see what happens to Lapis in Operation Dead Chariot. Except we won't because that got cancelled. So there you have it, the truth behind Emerald Mesa. Metal Gear Helios is actually just a disguise for the real Helios, Lapis is dead, Belphegor is Belphegor, Morpheus is technically an honorary part of the Glows, and Half-Life 3 is confirmed.
Helios?
Barton! Who are you?
Belphegor.
Someone who loads you, bitch! Now stand up and ride!